Right. I'll let folks have a minute to join here. Keep seeing folks joining, so I'll give another minute. All right. All right. Well, welcome everyone joining the room. Today we're going to talk about unlocking the school partnership puzzle. Before we get started, we'd like to hear about where everyone's coming from. So join in the chat where you're from, your name, any connection to Safe Routes to School, and any bike or bike to school day highlights from your community. We'll give folks a few minutes. Oh, we have someone joining from Hawaii, California, Portland, Oregon. Oh, British Columbia, nice. Ohio, Nebraska, Minnesota, Mississippi, great. California. All right, we have folks from coast to coast, even Canada. That's great. All right, yeah, if you're just joining, we're about to talk about unlocking the school partnership puzzle as part of the Colorado Safe Routes to School webinar series. Drop your name in the chat, where you're coming from, any connection to Safe Routes to School. And any bike month or bike to school day highlights. Oh, someone's hoping to do a bike bus Thursday. Exciting. Yep. Lots going on this springtime. Great. Well, feel free to keep sharing in the chat. All right. So, welcome. My name is Laura Harris. I'm joined with Corey Johnson. We're both working with the Safe Routes Partnership. At the partnership, our mission is just to advance safe walking and rolling to and from schools and everyday life. We work to improve health, equity, safety, and community well-being by helping everyone create places where everyone, regardless of your age, race, income, or ability, can move safely and comfortably. And so a big part of that work is supporting local partnerships, which is what our webinar today is focused on. So just a couple Zoom reminders before we jump in. Please use the chat box for any comments, ideas, resources, and you can use the Q&A box for questions so we can keep track of them. We are recording the webinar and we will share the recording as well as resources afterwards. Feel free to participate through the session and engage in the chat. Before we go into the content, we have a few highlights from Colorado Safe Routes to School resources. If you missed our earlier action planning webinar series, we have those recordings available, part one and part two, and we can send those out with our resources and links after the webinar. And these sessions go deeper into the planning processes as well as implementation strategies and can pair really well with today's conversations about partnerships. And we also wanted to share that early bird registration is now open for the National Safe Routes to School Conference happening in Minneapolis this October. The conference is going to be a great opportunity to connect with practitioners from across the country, learn from peer communities, explore implementation strategies and success stories. So if you're interested, registration will be open through July. All right, so our objectives for the day is understanding the school partnership puzzle. So we're talking about it as a puzzle. So how do we put the pieces together? So that's going to look like strategies for getting in the door. We'll share some real world examples from Colorado and some actions you can take, simple actions you can take before the end of the school year. We're not trying to have a perfectly solved puzzle, but we're going to hope you can help you leave with some concrete next steps and strategies that you can actually use. And I'll pass it to Corey.
Hi, everyone. So nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. Those of you who've been here before, nice to see you. And those of you who are new, thanks for joining us for the first time. For those of you who are new, and if you're kind of wondering why we have this Colorado focus, is that we've been doing this Colorado Safe Routes to School webinar series supported by the Colorado Department of Transportation. So thanks so much, CDOT, for sponsoring today's webinar. And we're super excited to, feature a really great success story from Colorado later on in the presentation. So thank you all for being here, and thanks to Colorado for doing so much awesome safe routes work. So as Laura mentioned, we're here to talk about school partnerships and unlocking that school partnership puzzle. And we wanted to do just a little quick introduction and framing around why school partnerships matter and why they're so important. I'm sure a lot of you already know a lot of these things as people who are working in safe routes, who are working with or alongside schools. But we found that school partnerships are really, a key piece, especially of a program called Safe Routes to Schools, Safe Routes to School. Schools have those direct relationships with students and families. They have those communications channels to help expand outreach and participation. School staff can really help build your capacity to do all kinds of great safe routes work, especially during arrival and dismissal, thinking about student behaviors, day-to-day safety concerns. School staff play a huge role in kind of like providing that additional insight and also support for safe routes to school programs. School partners can also help align their priorities with your priorities as safe routes practitioners. And so we know that everybody's busy, everyone has lots of things going on, lots of different goals. And so part of putting this puzzle piece together is figuring out how we can align these different priorities so that we're all working towards one common goal. And then, of course, our internal school champions, who we love so much, whether it's an administrator, a PE teacher, a support staff member, can really help sustain momentum, can help coordinate activities, even just like, the basics of the logistics of planning an event. School staff are super important and can also advocate for implementation over time. So having those school champions can really be the ones to help advance your safe routes work as it moves forward. And we know that strong school partnerships can really lead to increased program participation, more resources and support. So just being able to show that, schools love safe routes can encourage people to fund and support safe routes to school programs. Streamline communications, making sure that whatever you're saying and communicating with families is also mirrored by what the school is saying. That's really important. So just everybody being on the same page. And also just ramping up that enthusiasm and engagement around safe routes programs. So I'm going to turn it over to Laura to talk a little bit about the puzzle that we're trying to solve and put together here.
Thanks, Corey. So, yeah, so we know schools are, balancing a huge number of priorities every day. That can be, the academics they're delivering, staffing shortages, different kinds of transportation issues, school testing, wellness of the students, family communication, lots more things are everyday priorities within a school. So even though a lot of times schools might care deeply about walking and biking, they might not have capacity to engage right away. Doesn't mean that partnerships aren't possible. It just means maybe we need to approach it differently with flexibility, patience, and support. So some of the challenges we're hearing, these are all real examples from communities that we've worked with, are things like not hearing back from emails, classic. Confusion about who to contact. You think like this person's going to be the champion, but it's actually somebody totally different, or this person just doesn't have ability to help you with your program. Sometimes schools are supportive, but just totally overwhelmed. Very common, like we said, balancing lots of priorities. Or there might be policy barriers around programs like bike buses. Maybe something like this just isn't even allowed in a certain jurisdiction. So one thing to remember is that, a lack of response doesn't necessarily mean lack of interest. Often it's about timing, staffing, capacity, competing priorities, or simply not just having the right connection yet. And this is one of our mentee polls, I
Yeah,
believe.
should we
So
go
I'm
ahead
going to
and
drop, yeah, I have the link right here. So we know some of the challenges I just listed off, but we want to hear from you. what other challenges are you experiencing in making those partnerships of schools work?
So you all can take a moment either in the chat or here in the mentee to drop any challenges that you've experienced when you're trying to work with schools. Let's see, it looks like results are coming in. Here we go.
Yep, classic. Don't answer my emails, all
Yep.
of the above. Sharing data. Yep, that's a big one. No response. Limited availability, scheduling, finding the right contacts. Yep.
Cooperation,
Thinking
cost
walking and
sharing.
biking is too dangerous to be possible. Yep. So sometimes it's like that might be the barrier. It's just actually educating some of the school staff.
Yeah, these are good. Teachers are willing but overburdened. We also have our wonderful Safe Routes advocate, Jen, who's on the call as well. And she's probably going to talk about some of these challenges that you all have experienced. I'm sure that she's familiar with some of these from her experience too. So we're all in this together, figuring out the puzzle pieces together.
Bike bus not allowed. Staff changeover, students aging out. Having a champion partner at the same place consistently. Communication breakdowns. More drivers than any active transportation options, and staff doesn't see the point. Parents just don't want their kids to walk or bike. These are all pieces of the puzzle. So lots of pieces that we can address here. And, it's going to be hard to address all of them at once, but pick one that you can work on, and just starting small will help you get in the door. So I'll pass it to Corey for the next section.
Yeah, so I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about how you actually get your foot in the door and sharing some strategies that work. These are examples that we've heard from you all from our Safe Routes community. So knowing that there are all of these challenges and, kind of these barriers to building school partnerships, that there's still things that we can do, and, steps that we can take to at least, get a foot in the door and start building some of those bridges and some of those relationships with our school partners here. So I'm going to share a few, and then I'm going to pass it over to Jen to share a bunch more. And she has some really great examples of what she's been doing in Denver to build school partnerships. So first, getting off on the right foot, especially if you're, might be new to Safe Routes, or if you're approaching a new school community for the first time, that first introduction and that first impression is really important. And so if you're just introducing yourself, whether you're in person or via email, just being brief, being clear, connecting whatever it is that you're talking about to school priorities. Like we mentioned, that a lot of schools do care about safety and also care about all the other things they have going on in their school. So you can find a way to connect whatever the school is thinking about or concerned about or focus on with what Safe Routes is doing. That's great. So whether that's focusing on the safety piece, attendance is a big one for schools. So we've heard like a lot of really great anecdotes over the maybe past few years about a lot of kids being more excited to come to school on days when there's walking school bus program or a school streets program or a bike bus. So tying Safe Routes to attendance or academic achievement. And also being able to offer something concrete. So whether that's a resource like a walking and biking map, or maybe it's an event like a bike rodeo, or a safety tip poster for the front office. Like, what is it that you can offer to school? And also just making it easy to say yes. And sometimes the hardest part is just getting the person who needs to sign off to say yes to actually do so. So how can you make it as easy as possible for school partners to get on board and say yes to your ask? This is the slide deck that we'll share with you, so you'll all be able to, kind of like take this and use this as you want to. But we also put together just like a really simple outreach email. So, a few lines. It's not super detailed. Just here's who you are. Here's what you want to do. And then even at the end mentioning, do you have 15 minutes sometime this month to connect? So 15 minutes, knowing that, if with busy schools and busy administrators, being able to say we can keep this to 15 minutes is a really great way to kind of acknowledge that people and administrators and school staff are busy, but also try and get in just a little bit of time to introduce yourself. So feel free to use this email template as you're reaching out to school partners. And then also connecting with the right staff is also really important. So sometimes our, first thought is to go, straight to the principal because they're the people who, like usually sign off on something. And yes, ultimately we do need our school administrators to be on board and to, sign off and give that seal of approval. But there are also other entry points into schools. So, the principal, of course, they have the ultimate decision-making authority. They know the school's priorities and they kind of provide that operational oversight. So we do need them. You can also engage other school partners like teachers, PE staff. Those are the people who are, with students on a day-to-day basis, who understand their behaviors, travel patterns. They understand the school community, kind of what students are dealing with at home and with their families. And so they understand, kind of like the student and family level, what kids need in order to walk, bike and roll to school safely. Transportation staff, so thinking about your school district transportation staff, people who might have expertise on busing, circulation, zoning, traffic flow. Those are people who kind of provide some of that operational and logistical support. And so when you're thinking about trying to improve, arrival dismissal or routing or other logistics around walking and biking to school, the district transportation staff can be great people to connect with. Same thing with your facilities and operations staff. So people who know about the, campus infrastructure in the building and how things work. Maintenance, they manage logistics from running a lot of school and community events. So they can kind of provide those practical tips and insights and also that on the ground support for safe routes activities that you might be doing. School nurses, counselors, and support staffs, they also have that understanding of, what students need, what students and families need, accessibilities needs, family challenges. And so they'll also be able to talk about some of the barriers to safe walking, biking, and rolling, and also be able to talk about equity issues that might be impacting students. And then lastly, family liaisons and community coordinators can also play a big role, kind of similar to that support staff, having those trusted relationships and communications pathways with families. And they can also really help expand program participation, reach some of the students and families who, maybe have experienced a lot of barriers to participation, and can help build that community trust and buy-in as a trusted voice within the school. So of course, these are just a few school staff. If there are others that aren't on this list and you want to shout them out in the chat, feel free to do so. But the main takeaway here is that there are lots of different people you can connect with if you're trying to build relationships with schools. It doesn't always have to be, the administrator or no one. There are other people in the building too who can support you. Next up, when emails don't work. So hear this a lot. Sometimes you send an email and it just goes into the void and you don't know what happens. You might try to, you might send a few emails and they still just, go nowhere. It's the email to nowhere. So you might want to try a few times. And maybe again, going back to that list here, if there are other people you can include on that email, maybe it's the principal and, school office staff or the school nurse or PE teacher. I see some comments in here about the school resource officers, school secretary. Yes, absolutely. Parents, caregivers, PTA members. Those are all other people who you can include in your communications. And then there are also some other approaches too, whether that's calling the front office or stopping by during a professional development day so you're not interrupting student learning. Those PD days can be a great time to kind of connect with people. Same thing with telework days. I don't know if other school districts have telework days, but here in Maryland, we have schools that have telework days. And so maybe trying to kind of like call or touch base during a time where it's not as busy. Connecting through LinkedIn. LinkedIn is, the place to connect with people. And depending on how you use it, that could be a great place to connect with the school staff member. So try that if you're on it and up for it. Also asking for warm introductions. Maybe there's a, parent or caregiver, PTA leader who can introduce you to a school administrator or another staff member. They can be kind of like those great connectors between the community and the school. So definitely try to chat with your parent and caregiver leaders as well. And then there are also other opportunities to connect during the school day or during school events. So, of course, there are like those formal school events that might not necessarily be safe routes to school events, but are still opportunities for you to connect. So, PT and PTO meetings, back to school night, school and family events. United Schools are always doing, movie night or reading night or school dance or just kind of like those general school activities that are happening. Those are great opportunities to go and, connect with school staff members. After school programs, so connecting with after school programs providers, that's another great opportunity to build those relationships. I mentioned staff professional development days and telework days, and also just like general community meetings and events. So what's happening in the community, if there's a civic association meeting or a tenants association meeting or a town hall or just other community events that are happening, maybe festivals and fairs. That's another idea. And then there's also informal and on the ground engagement. So things like arrival and dismissal observations, talking with crossing guards also is another really important part of the school's ecosystem. So having conversations with crossing guards about, what they're seeing, what they're noticing, some of their insights, that is such a valuable voice to include in a Safe Routes program. Just hanging out and seeing what's happening by the bike racks and pickup areas. And that can be a part of an arrival and dismissal observation, or just kind of like noticing as you're approaching a school, what's happening in some of those, kind of like travel zones. Walking school routes with families. So if you do manage to connect with, a parent or caregiver leader, maybe joining them on a walk home or a walk to wherever they're going after school, whether it's a park or maybe it's a library, and then having a conversation there. And there's also informal conversations before or after school. So I know that there are some schools where there are, parents and families and caregivers who hang out as they wait for kids to go into the building. How can you use that time to have some informal conversations around what's happening? And I love this field tip here about wearing some sort of like bright or professional clothing to show that like you're official, you're not just hanging around the school building, but having like a safety vest, or a name tag or something that shows that you're there representing Safe Routes is a great way to start building that trust and buy-in with your school community members and partners. And then of course, like looking at school staff, that's really great and important. And there are also opportunities to look beyond school. So these are other partners who might not be on a school campus on a day-to-day basis, but can help open doors to schools. Maybe they're already existing community partners like Parks and Rec, libraries. They might already have partnerships with local schools, affordable housing communities or other communities, around the school campus might already have some of those existing relationships. Community organizations, youth groups like Scouts, sports teams, other groups that kids might be involved in, 4-H. We've heard some examples of those types of partnerships. And just like neighborhood groups as well. So if there are any, like I mentioned before, civic associations or other kind of like more neighborhood-based groups that might have some students at the school, that's something that that's another way to connect with school communities. So these are just a few examples. And again, we always think that if you're not already connected to a school, then being able to still make that introduction is really important. And whether you're just going to observe or go on a walk with with families, that formal introduction is really important. Schools don't want people just random people hanging around for no reason. So if you're going to go to a school, whether it's even if it's an informal capacity, do make sure that you're introducing yourself and getting some sort of approval to be there. And again, that formal introduction, having that safety vest, having a name tag, saying what you're there for. That's a really important part of building, of building that trust and buy-in. I mean, I see somebody kind of mentioned something similar at the in the notes here. Yes, getting that formal approval is really important. So yeah, don't roll up and just like hang out by a bike rack. At least let people know that you're there and that you're, official. And ask if you can be there and explain why you're actually there. And then just a few quick strategies that we saw work, or that we've seen work with Safe Routes. Start small. So, maybe that's piloting one event or one quick activity or one quick program. It might be something that's like not even as big as walk and roll to school day. It could be, just a really informal walking Wednesday, or a simple activity that doesn't involve a whole lot of logistics and materials, and that can really help reduce the burden on staff. So you're trying to make this as easy to say yes as possible. Also bringing ready to use resources. So saying, here's the poster, here's the flyer, here's the safety tip sheet. All of that is really, really important. So make it easy to say yes, and then focusing on relationships and not one-time asks. So as opposed to, just going and trying to do that big community event or that big school-wide event, think about those small steps you can take to build those relationships over time, as opposed to being so focused on a single event or a single activity. And then, of course, if you do something at a school, even if you do an informal observation, or maybe you do a walking little school day event or small bike rodeo activity, finding ways to kind of keep that relationship going and building momentum. So sending highlights and photos, that's a great way to kind of show schools that people had a good time and it was successful and you want to do more. And celebrating successes, following through quickly. So if you're doing an observation and you see opportunities to take action to improve safety, follow through on some of those things and explain what it is that could possibly be done to make it safer for kids to walk, bike, and roll to school. Keep your communications brief. People do not have time for long emails or long documents. So be short, be succinct, get your point across, and that'll definitely increase chances of people actually reading what it is that you're sharing. Check in before the next school year. So in those weeks leading up to school, just reintroduce yourself, say how excited you are to connect again, and remind people that you're there and ready to support, and then make participation feel worthwhile. So again, people are busy, there's a lot going on, so make it worth it. And for some people, what's worth it is just seeing a lot of kids smiling and having a great day, or seeing that caregivers are really happy because an event went well, or that you made a small improvement that actually really changed safety. So make it something that's really worth your while. I won't go too in depth with these examples here, but we did include some post-event follow-up communications. So a few prompts that you all can use as you're, kind of sharing out some highlights or takeaways from the events that you're doing. So as you're sending out those emails and sending out those highlights, feel free to use some of these prompts and put them in your emails to address schools when you're following up about event or activity that you did. And again, they're all brief and succinct, and will be a great way to ensure that your school partners will actually read your email. And then a few final tips around addressing common barriers. So again, if you're not getting a response, try a different channel. Maybe email doesn't work, call, LinkedIn, social media, word of mouth. There are other ways besides email. Policy barriers, start with an education or encouragement event. So if their policy is that kids can't walk and bike to school, maybe there's a way to kind of test out a pilot event and see if you all can walk and roll as a school together and think about some ways to address safety concerns. Low capacity, offer to leave everything. So if the teacher's saying or school's saying, hey, we don't have the capacity to do this, you say, I can do it all, but also think about your own capacity to do that. So what can you realistically lead and what can you realistically do well? But schools will appreciate you just being able to take the lead on that. And then no time for events, drop off resources, drop off, safety tip sheet, drop off a poster, drop off, safety coloring sheets or activities that people can do, during after school or in the front office or during indoor recess. So if there are other things that have kind of worked for you, feel free to drop them in the chat as well. We'd love to get your ideas here. This is a really quick list of different channels that you all can go to as you're thinking about communicating with schools. So newsletter, text message systems, flyers home, social media, PTA, PTO meetings, arrival and dismissal, student engagement. So actually like kids being able to talk about safe routes themselves can be a really powerful motivator. And also those staff meetings and PD days. So finding a way to introduce yourself during a staff meeting or PD day can be really helpful. And then again, you all kind of already know some of our basic education and encouragement events. So again, think about starting small. It doesn't have to be a huge event. It doesn't even have to be a huge walk and roll to school day. It can be a little, casual meetup where everybody walks to school together. Walking Wednesdays, field day. I don't know if other people do field day, but field day is coming up here. So like field day could be a great day for some of these things. A one-time family walking route. So just like starting out with those small, simple activities can be great ways to build those bridges. And like I mentioned, offer to take the lead, dropping off those resources. And yeah, just making it something that's simple and small and easy for schools to say yes to. So I went through that quickly because I want to get to our Safe Routes Practitioner Spotlight to hear about some really great examples and ideas that are coming out of Colorado. And so I'm going to introduce our Safe Routes Advocate in Northwest Denver. Her name's Jenn Superka, and she's going to share some of the awesome work that she has been doing to build relationships with communities in Denver. So Jenn, I will stop sharing my screen and I will hand it over to you. And after Jenn presents, we'll have some questions. We'll have some time at the end for Q&A. So if you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A box and we'll get to them at the end of our presentation. And so thanks everybody who already started that. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Corey. All right, let me get situated here. My Zoom control is covering my arrows. So, okay, I got it. I am Jenn Superka. I'm the Safe Routes Advocate. I work in Northwest Denver. I am a lifelong Denverite, and I think that's important because I have deep ties to Denver. And also growing up here, I witnessed exponential growth in Denver, over the past few decades, while at the same time witnessing that certain communities were left out of that growth. I moved into my neighborhood, which is in Northwest Denver in 2010, and immediately got connected with both my neighborhood registered, or my registered neighborhood organization to volunteer. And I had heard a story about the school up the street on Colorado Public Radio about how they were a turnaround school. So I started volunteering as a reading buddy up there. So I have a background in policy, education, equity, child protection, and communications, all of which serves me very well in this role. And I started commuting by bike in 2005. So I learned to ride my bike as a kid. I kind of hated it. We lived at the top of a hill. It was a whole thing. But I started using my bike regularly to get to work in 2005. It was very convenient because I could use mostly bike path to get to work. So that really opened my eyes to both the immense benefits of biking to work, mentally, physically, but also some of the real challenges. So that has been a very helpful perspective for me to have in this role. And when we think about the why of our work, I think we're all aligned. Safe Routes to School helps produce healthy, active kids. They perform better at school. There's mental health benefits, and we're helping them create and establish lifelong habits. It's great for the environment. There's safety in numbers, so there's safety and visibility when kids are riding their bikes or walking as a group together. The one that really stands out to me, that really drives my work, is strengthening those social connections in a neighborhood and creating community. Because first of all, we know that if we make the streets safer for our most vulnerable users, it's safer for everybody. And I truly believe it takes a village. So it's, I try not to concentrate just on the school staff or the school community, but really that broader community of the neighbors who live around the school, because they're driving on our streets too. So the way we're structured within the city and county of Denver, there's the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. We call that DOTI. In DOTI is the Office of Community and Business Engagement, and within that department is the CALC program. So that is a grant-funded program, the Community Active Living Coalition. We are tasked with promoting active transportation throughout Denver. That includes community engagement around DOTI projects, supporting school travel and events. So we're the programmatic side of Safe Routes to School. We support and permit street art. So there's a mural that was going up next to one of my schools. And we also have a very small micro grant program that will pick up again this summer. So within CALC, we have representatives. Well, we focus our work in 3 quadrants in the city. So each quadrant has a full-time community connector. Again, they're supporting active transportation. They're doing community engagement around transportation issues, and they're also building relationships with community partners. And each community connector works with a part-time Safe Routes advocate. And again, we manage the relationships with schools in our quadrants. So like every city, Denver has areas of inequity. These are neighborhoods that have a higher population of people who have been historically discriminated against and excluded from those growth opportunities, like I mentioned. These neighborhoods, they're the darker blue. They're less affluent, they have higher rates of diabetes and asthma, they have fewer trees, they're more likely to be displaced. And these neighborhoods fall along our major interstates. So east to west is I-70 and north to south is I-25. So we refer to this as the inverted L. So we're focused on these high equity needs areas, which is why that's why we cover 3 of the 4 quadrants. So we're really focused on these neighborhoods along the inverted L. So again, the SRAs they're the Safe Routes Advocates are focused on schools in these high equity needs areas. We manage the school relationships because we all know that schools are kind of a special entity. And then we support Safe Routes to School events and program planning. And share, that includes sharing best practices and toolkits. So like Corey said, I was invited here today to share some examples of my work and hopefully inspire new ideas for getting a little creative where it comes to trying to build relationships with schools and communities. I just highlighted a couple of my challenges, the first being that the further you go down in the org chart, the less influence you tend to have. And the fact that I work part-time. So those have been a little challenging for me. And then when I was thinking about my next slide, like what's an image that would sort of represent like when you first try to reach out to a school. Now I'm thinking what I should have done is like when you empty out the puzzle pieces onto your table, it's just like a pile of puzzle pieces and you somehow have to make sense of it. But this is the image I chose. If I can get it to go, hold on. There we go. So this is an AI image. I do not believe in using resources to create these types of things, but I did find it very apt because I often feel when I'm approaching a new school, like this guy in the vest, I'm like, hey, does anyone want to bike or walk or roll to school? So it can be a little hectic and chaotic and feel like, there's no good way to get in. And like Corey was saying, there's so many challenges that we've all experienced. Schools are busy, they have an abbreviated school year, they're dealing with a lot of competing priorities. Families are busy, it really is a privilege to have the time to walk with your kid to school or ride bikes with them. And communities very often have had negative experiences with government agencies or outside organizations. So there can be a lot of distrust there. And of course, on top of that, just it seems like everybody is stretched thin. And I know, school districts look different in a lot of different areas, but here in Denver, our school district is very decentralized. So we really do have to work individually with schools. So every school is different, every community is different. So what might work at one school could completely flop at another. And I've certainly experienced that. So as you think about how to implement a program in these different settings, I just wanted to come here and share some examples of the things that I've tried. Some things have worked and some others that haven't, but we're always learning. So my first example is Tre Vista Elementary. So this is the school that I mentioned that was up the street from my house. Like I live 2 blocks away from it. Like I said, it had recently been a turnaround school. They had a new principal. There was a high percentage of students who qualify for free and reduced lunch, and it's also in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood. So again, like many schools, they're stretched thin. So as I stepped into my role, I asked about Tre Vista, and it was certainly, one of our schools that we wanted to make inroads with. But I was told that we had tried. We had emailed the principal and we dropped off flyers at the front desk and never got a reply. So I decided that I would check the school calendar to see, just sort of, get a feel for what they had going on. And I was very lucky. They were about to have there's a local nonprofit called Wish for Wheels that donates new bikes to second graders at high need schools. So they had an event coming up. So I contacted the person on the calendar invite and asked if I could help. And they enthusiastically said yes, because they needed all the help they could get. So I showed up with a busload of volunteers from Subaru and we built bikes, and kids got to pick an adult to help them ride their new bike and fit their new bike. So it was a great event. And that was my entry point into Troy Vista. So at that event, I met parents who were leading the recently reorganized parent-teacher organization. They were definitely excited when I offered support for active transportation efforts. And then one of those parents introduced me to the PE teacher, Mr. P, which led to, we recruited him to our teacher champion program. All of this, of course, took time. But again, this is my entry point. But because I was sort of linked in with the PTO then, I just was looking for opportunities to show up. I volunteered at the school's chili cook-off fundraiser, and I also volunteered at field day, just like Corey said. Those are great ins. And during our conversations with the PE teacher, Mr. P told me that a lot of students who had gotten these bikes didn't have an opportunity to learn to ride bikes. So I introduced him to my contacts at Denver Parks and Rec, Alternative Sports, because I knew they had a bike program. So they actually went to the PE class a couple times to help kids learn how to ride their new bikes. So over time, I became a familiar face, and I think that was really helpful because, like somebody mentioned, principals like to know who's on their campus. And so being that familiar face, the principal knew who I was, she knew what I was there for. It helped me build trust, and it really opened the door. So the biggest lesson for me was to find out what's already happening and look for ways to genuinely help. I mean, it all had to be kind of related to work, but a lot of it was a little bit outside my zone. But I think showing up consistently and being that familiar face before I made an ask was really important. And just as a side note, so we have a public housing community that's just a couple blocks north of Tre Vista, and that's my boss, Elizabeth. She's the community connector. She had already established a free bike repair at Quick Newton Homes. So I joined her in that, and that really gave me an opportunity to talk to parents and students directly, while they're getting their bikes fixed. So this is some of our bike and roll pictures. After I sort of made inroads with Tre Vista, we hosted our first bike and roll event, super popular. And I think too, once you're able to have a successful event, you have something to point back to. So it's been one of my most enduring relationships. So another school that was sort of on my list to reach out to was Swansea. And it sits in a neighborhood with a long history of environmental injustice. So they have dealt with pollution from a former smelter site, major interstate expansion. They have railroads around them. It's like two highways and a railroad. I mean, they're completely cut off. So just decades of infrastructure decisions that have impacted their quality of life. So because of that history, I knew that trust would be complicated, and I didn't have any direct connections in the neighborhood. And honestly, I just sort of knew that, I think a lot of people were just exhausted from having dealt with the city agencies during the I-70 expansion. So it was one of those that was on my radar, but I didn't know what my in was going to be. So what came up was Swansea was slated for a traffic study. So I'm connected to the engineering side in Dottie, and they were going to do this traffic study. I was like, oh, that's one of my schools. Do you mind if I just sit in on these meetings? I have a lot to learn. So one of the first things they did with the school was they did a site visit, and they chose a day that was a staff in service day. So we got to walk around with the staff, and they were able to point out, the issues that they had around the school. So this was just amazing to me. I learned so much. I knew this area, but I didn't know it the way I learned to see it through their eyes. They see this every day. So they were talking about kids crossing the railroad tracks to get to school, how dangerous it was because we had several homeless encampments around the neighborhood, and kids just didn't feel safe. So after this site visit, Elizabeth and I actually walked over to the railroad. We could see in the fence, we walked the pedestrian bridge, which is not well lit. It's covered with broken glass. It didn't feel safe. Then we made our way to the library because we heard a lot of kids would go to the library after school. Told the staff what we were up to. The head librarian was so excited. He offered to take us on a walking tour himself. So we did another walking tour where we saw broken sidewalks and sort of the crime issues that people in the neighborhood are really concerned about. So again, I think that was just that experience taught me something important, and that is that before you can propose solutions, people need to know that you understand their reality. So I mean, again, I kind of lucked out with the traffic study, but it was a great intro to Swansea. Oh, and I will say real quick about Swansea. So throughout that process, I met their social media person. She actually works for the district. So I was just yapping about what I do, and she got really excited. So she and I helped plan their first their first walk and roll last fall. And again, it was so successful, so popular that now we're doing a bike and roll celebration this month with them. But again, we had such a successful event that we had something to show for it and prove our worth. So my next example is West High School. This is one of my favorite examples. We don't work a lot with high schools. I'm sure you guys have the same experience. But it was another school that was slated for a traffic study. So we had hired consultants to help out with that process, and they were expressing that they had no luck in getting a hold of anyone at the school. So I offered to help. I didn't know what that was going to be, but what it turned out being, like Corey said, I went on LinkedIn just to see if I was connected to anyone at West High School, and it was like a third degree connection with the assistant principal, vice principal, and just reached out to him on LinkedIn, said, "Hey, we've been trying to contact you." I will say, oh, and by the way, enthusiastic response. We set up a meeting right away. I want to reiterate what Corey was saying about your communications. I think, like, we all know schools are busy. It's like getting their attention is so hard. I am a big advocate of putting your ask in the subject line, because you got to get their attention. You got to, get what an ask is often an offer in my mind. Like, you should be offering more than you're asking. But anyway, so if you guys ever want me to like edit your emails, I'm happy to do that. And I will say I was very critical of the email that the consultants had sent, because it was very long. It didn't get to the point right away, and it was from the consultants. Like, that doesn't mean anything to school staff. Like, like this consultant group, it's not going to trigger anything for them. Anyway, first meeting with West High School, the principal and vice principal were very honest and direct with us. We made our pitch, and they said that they felt that in the past, the city was always asking the school community for input and never doing anything about it. So they felt completely ignored and disregarded, and they were very reluctant to participate in this. So in return, we were very clear about our commitment to the school, what we could provide, what we could not provide. We had wanted to do outreach with a survey, which we did, but they said this too. They were like, "You're not likely to get a lot of participation that way." So what we did, and I think this was my idea, I'm not 100%, but we had a student focus group where we brought gift cards to the students. We actually had the vice principal, not mediate, but like facilitate the group. We got to ask them about their transportation issues and stuff like that. Learned so much. First of all, learned that transportation is the biggest attendance issue for the school, which in turn is a performance issue for kids. We heard kids talk about how they stay at different homes because their parents might be divorced. DPS does not provide buses to high school students, so these kids are trying to figure out public transportation on their own. And that often means multiple buses, multiple modes of transportation. So these kids are super resilient. And then we got to walk the neighborhood with them. And again, we just learned so much. And I think too, the lesson here is that sometimes you have to wait for your approach with schools. And then just two more things, because I know we're running kind of low on time, but SRAs being part-time, again, we're very focused on these individual school events and programs. But we started to think bigger last year about what could we do sort of citywide. And we came up with the idea for Bike Fest. So the idea was that leading into May, Bike and Roll to School Month, we would put on a single event in each of the quadrants at a park to get people excited, to get bikes tuned up, to get our partners excited, so the one that I hosted in Northwest Denver was at Berkeley Lake Park. We invited our partners. Bicycle Colorado was there. I know Benedict's in the audience. I think Benedict actually led our bike ride around the lake. So thank you, Benedict. And then there was a library at this park. So I went to the library and was like, "Hey, do you mind? We're going to be in your space." Wendy, the head librarian, super excited, asked how she could help. They were a part of our scavenger hunt, so kids could go in and get a sticker. They also did a display of books about biking and walking. And she's been a great partner ever since. And then I put the map there because I was looking at the map, trying to scope out the area, and I see this pin of the Krieg School of Historical Fencing. So this was a group of guys who dress up and do sword fights at the park every Saturday. And I invited them. And so they were part of our festival too, which I think helped it definitely feel like a festival atmosphere. And then the final thing I'll tell you about is I created this event that we just held a couple weeks ago, a bike bus summit. I say I created it. It took off from my idea, but the idea came from these bike and rolls we were doing at schools. And I would talk to parents who were like, "Oh, I ride bikes with my kids to school every once in a while," or, "Oh yeah, my kid and his friends ride their bikes to school." And then we have another partner who has a very successful bike bus. So I was like, "Oh, we need to connect these guys. And maybe we could have like a meeting, in Northwest Denver of all these people who are like either starting a bike bus or already have one, and they can learn from each other." Well, we got connected with DPS's sustainability group, which was great because it's been a little challenging for us to connect to the school district as a whole. So we got connected with their sustainability team, and I mentioned this idea and they were psyched. And so they became our partners. We made it district wide. We had about 50 people attending. And again, it was all levels of bike buses. So we created this opportunity for them to learn from each other. That's Alan Cogill. He is well known in Denver. He's the one with the very successful bike bus. So he was our keynote speaker. Very successful event. So again, I think it's really about trying to think outside the box, yapping your face off about what you're up to, because I've had so many random connections. Like another thing I'll mention real quick, I met someone at a Super Bowl party, told her what I did, found out she was at a school I was trying to reach out to. She was their music teacher, got her on board, and we had a bike bus celebration. So I think this is all repetitive of stuff Corey was saying. I think, again, get creative. Talk constantly about what you're doing. It kind of goes back to that, what is that why that you're really connected with? Because I think when you're excited, it gets other people excited. I think giving a school a win right off the bat is really important. So again, like with West High School, I think the fact that we could give their students a gift card and actually listen to them was a huge win for the school. I would say, yeah, don't leave too much work to the school. Don't be unclear about what exactly the school side of the work needs to be. And again, every school is different. Every community is different. I think, Corey, I think you covered all the potential partners. Like I said, I would definitely add DPS, their sustainability group. We've definitely had good luck with the group that runs their crossing guard program as well. I've also had a lot of luck with neighborhood organizations because people are either connected to the school because they're a parent or they know people, or they're teachers who live in the neighborhood, which is more and more rare. But and the rec centers have been just amazing, and Parks and Rec is one of our best partners. So my recommendations for, ideas for connection this month, again, we're running out of time. You're not going to get their attention. I almost guarantee it. Volunteer for field day, 100%, Corey. Look ahead, look at their calendar. And by looking ahead, they probably haven't posted anything for next year. Look back, see what they were doing in August of last year. And plant those seeds, just maybe send them a happy end of year, bring them donuts, that kind of thing. And identify those champions and connectors that you want to reach out to. So summer is all about building partnerships, learning context, and preparing for fall programming. And that's all I have, Corey.
Jenn, this is so awesome. I feel like I just hear you listen to you talk forever about all the great work that you're doing. And it's just it's so practical. I mean, even things like looking back and seeing what people did last year. I wouldn't think about that as something to prepare for, a new activity. But if something's not out yet, just see what they did last time and they'll probably do the same thing. So I just appreciate you coming on and sharing all of your experience and expertise and wisdom. This is so helpful.
Well, thank you so much. It was actually really great for me to be able to reflect on some of these challenges because I didn't really get a chance to say, but I'm still facing challenges. Like somebody was saying how I've sent out all these emails and I haven't got a response, and I'm facing those challenges too. So it's sort of like helps me think about like how am I going to change my approach to try and crack that nut.
Yeah, it's always kind of like that nice moment to, reflect and see what worked and what didn't work and how to adjust for next time.
Yeah.
There are some really great questions in the Q&A box. Like Laura, do you think we can pivot to Q&A if that's okay and just get through some of these questions?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So we have one question about doing a walk assessment or something before the school year ends. Who should we loop in and who should we establish contact with at the school site? So is there still time to do like a little mini walk audit or walk assessment before the end of the school year? And who would be the best person to kind of, get involved with something like that? And I'm happy to answer, Jen or Laura, if you have suggestions, you can take yours too. I will
What?
say there's still time.
Yes, there's still time. I think the way I would approach it, I would definitely let the principal know that's something I wanted to do and get their permission, but I wouldn't ask them to be a part of it. But I would hope to find like a parent or a neighborhood person that was connected to the school to sort of partner with that.
Yeah, for sure. And there also ways to just kind of do like a very informal walking assessment too. So not everything has to be like a formal walk audit. We have a really great kind of like simple neighborhood walkability checklist that we can drop into the chat or I can share it afterwards. So if you want to start with like something that's kind of like informal or like a pre-walk audit, walk with families and school staff, that could be a great way to get something in before the school year ends. And we can drop that in the follow-up email. That's a good question. Another question is why was affordable housing and public housing included as a partner? And so Jen, I know that you kind of talked about there was like that bike repair clinic that was happening at the at the public housing community. And I've seen a lot of communities that might have like, different like their own events or programs. Sometimes they're like connected to recreation centers. So like there are a lot of kids who like go there for after school programs or community events. So that's the way that I've partnered with public housing. But Jen, just curious if you had any other insights into why they might be
Well, I think
partners.
in my neighborhood, especially the public housing community feels very separate and it feels
Mhm.
very guarded, for good reasons, good and bad, I guess. So when I got involved with my neighborhood organization, we had tried to outreach to them and like include them and stuff, and we couldn't get that done. So I was very sensitive to that when I started this role. So I think again, having that free bike repair there and being able to connect with kids and parents directly and let them know who I am, it's again familiar face, becoming a trusted partner and just getting the word out. So being able to distribute flyers and stuff like that, and they're already connected to the school. The school is their trusted partner, so they're helping me get in with the school as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing those examples. And maybe one more. What are long-term measures of success that show behavior change, community impact, or health improvements? Maybe thinking about kind of like, going back to school and saying, hey, we did this, and here's how things improved, or here is the impact. Any examples of, kind of like showing that change over time? That can be for Jen or Laura.
Okay, I will just say this is one of the hardest things for us because again, like the SRAs are all part-time. So there's definitely a capacity. We've had a lot of changes to our program as well. So we lost our two full-time managers. But this is something that we are constantly thinking about, mostly for reporting for our grant, right? Like, how are we going to show like the impact of what we do? So I don't have an answer to it. It is top of mind, however. So I think, for me personally, it would be qualitative feedback from the schools saying kids love it. We're seeing engagement. I'm trying to show that bike buses are growing, participation is growing. It's
Yeah.
equitable participation as well. So
Yeah, for sure. And Laura just put here in the chat too, like travel tallies, caregiver surveys, looking at attendance on days when there's a walk and roll to school day event or a bike bus or a bike train and seeing if there's an increase in attendance on those days. And also, you like those anecdotes are also really powerful. Like administrators love to know that kids and families are happy. So like when they can see that kids are like, oh, I love this, parents like, oh, this is so great, we have to do this again, like that's a huge motivator in continuing something. So like it might not be the most, scientific way of measuring success, but like a smile totally will is such a powerful motivator for people. So yeah, don't count out the anecdotal evidence. All right, we are at time. So Jenn, I want to first thank you so much for coming and sharing your expertise and your experience with partnering with schools. This has been so helpful. You shared so many practical tips. For those of you who are, on the call and are looking for ideas about how to, kind of wrap up your school year, some things you can do. Think about doing a walk and roll event, or, maybe just introducing yourself to a school staff member via email. Those small steps can go a big way in building those school partnerships. So in our follow-up email, we'll share some other additional ideas for things you can do before the end of the school year. They're all in the slide deck as well. We just didn't have time to get to everything today, but we have some other great tips and ideas along with the ones that Jenn shared. And yeah, just thank you all so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Laura, thanks so much for being a great co-host and joining as well. Thank you so much to CDOT for sponsoring this. We really appreciate your support over the years to their Colorado Safe Routes to School series. So thank you all so much, and good luck connecting with schools. This is a topic I'm sure we'll be exploring more. This is, just one part of a larger conversation, but I hope you're able to walk away with some practical tips and strategies that may inspire you to, get on LinkedIn or go and judge the chili cook-off. And who knows, that can lead to a wonderful Safe Routes program at a new school. So yeah, thank you so much for being here, and we will follow up with slide deck, the recording, the survey that'll pop up when you leave the webinar today, and then some additional resources in the follow-up email. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you
you all.
for
Thanks,
having me.
Jenn. Bye.
Bye.